Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. This is the second time I've been on in 2 nights. I can't believe it. Because last night at 6, if you missed it, we were talking about how to reduce incidences of violence in schools with Andrew Old and a few other people. So if you missed that, definitely check it out on the podcast. I think it's well worth a listen to, if I do say so myself. We were talking about what we can do about it, the causes of it, and lots more besides. So that was last night. Tonight, I am planning to talk to Katharine Birbalsingh about her protest. I don't know whether to call it a protest movement. I'm going to ask her. But her March for Children that she's announced. Sort of this march in London, which seems to be encompassing quite a few issues, actually. She's talked a little bit about smartphone use, academies, curriculum freedom, the schools bill, and lots more besides. So yeah, should be an interesting conversation. Before we do anything, it could be a good time for me to say thanks to our sponsors tonight. One is obviously John Catt Educational, who are leading publishers of professional development resources in the UK and globally. You can fetch yourself a John Catt book from the John Catt bookshop, which is johncattbookshop.com. And that you can access their full range of titles. They deliver internationally as well if you work abroad, and you can get 20% off any book on the John Catt website by using the code JCTTR2425. I want to remind everybody as well, please do feel free to get involved in the conversation. If you're listening live, then you can click the little microphone icon at any point and get involved in the conversation, whether you agree or disagree. All views welcome here, of course. And yeah, dial in, get involved. And then also, if you are listening back to this as a recording or a podcast, then hopefully you can also get involved by tweeting at us. And telling us what you think through that means. And of course, if you are interested in never missing a show on Teachers Talk Radio, then definitely sign up for our newsletter on the website. We've got a new newsletter called Sound Bites and Insights, and essentially it's a rundown of everything that's happened in the previous week on Teachers Talk Radio. And bear in mind that we probably have like 5, 7, 10 shows a week. So it's impossible, obviously, to engage with all of that if you're a busy teacher. But the newsletter will hopefully help, because we handpick 3 or 4 of the shows that you could listen to and get involved in a bit more from the previous week. And we sort of spotlight those and highlight those, and it goes straight into your inbox every week. So you can just sign up on the homepage. Obviously, it's free. It's a newsletter. We deliver it every weekend to 10,000 educators, and you could be one of them. All you have to do is go on the homepage and sign in, get involved. Catherine's going to be joining us soon, but maybe it would be a good chance for me to run down what Catherine's actually done in education so far. So if you don't know who Katharine is, she's an educator, author. She advocates for education reform, I guess. She's widely known for a traditionalist approach to schooling. She's the founder of Michaela Community School in London. She was actually born in New Zealand, raised in Canada, moved to the UK at 15, studied at Oxford University. She's written various blogs, and she probably came to prominence in the UK in the 2010 Conservative Party conference, where she famously criticised the education system for, in her view, perpetuating low standards and hindering social mobility. And then she left teaching, and in 2014 she set up the Michaela Community School. which is known as Michaela for short, and that's become a very interesting topic when it comes to education debate, because obviously the proponents of more traditional teaching methods and strict behavior systems have come to probably support Michaela, and then on the other side, you've had people on the other side of the debate who perhaps are less supportive, who criticise Michaela and the teaching methods at Michaela for being too traditional. And also, Katharine is known as Britain's strictest school head teacher, headmistress. I think some commentary uses various different media describe as that whenever she seems to appear. And yeah, so that's an introduction to Katharine, and Katharine is here now. I'm just going to add her in. And as I said, the topic tonight, the last time I talked to Katharine was actually after she had her famous interview with Bridget
Tom?
Phillipson. Katharine, do you remember that? The interview with Bridget Phillipson.
Huh?
Do you remember your meeting with
Oh,
Bridget Phillipson?
yes. Of course I remember it. Sorry, I've just been trying for ages to tell you that I'm here. So
Oh, you're here.
I wasn't sure.
Don't worry. Don't worry, you're here.
Right. Okay.
I was asking you to, because the last time we spoke was it was like shortly after the meeting you had with Bridget Phillipson, and then
Yes.
there was a lot of like press on the back of that, and then the government issued a statement, didn't they, and said that I can't actually remember what they said, but I remember it was quite critical of yourself. Um,
Yes.
I
And
mean,
filled with a load of lies. But anyway, go on.
well, in essence, what's your? I mean, you've had a couple of months have passed since that, so has anything changed since then? Have you sort of reflected on it in any way, shape, or form? Are you sort of comfortable with that? And where are you at with that?
Nowhere really. Same position, which is that I wish Bridget Phillipson would listen to school leaders, and she's not. It's the same position I've always had, um, which is a great shame. I wish she'd visit successful schools and find out why they're successful and be interested in understanding what makes schools successful. She's not asking those questions, and she's not interested, which is a real shame.
She said,
Obviously, seeing as she's education secretary.
again, personal view here, Katharine, like just from me, Tom. She does seem
Yes.
quite nice though, as a person.
Well, I have no idea whether or not she's nice. I have to say her spads are really not nice and just like to make up all kinds of nonsense. But whether or not she's nice is kind of
Hmm.
irrelevant. It's whether or not she's willing to listen, and I don't think that's particularly nice, to people who know what they're doing. One thing that really annoys me in with teaching is that people who aren't teachers think they know what it is to be a teacher. And because everyone's been to school, as in fact the government, their official position after that was she doesn't need lectures from anybody. She's lived it, i.e.,
Hmm.
she doesn't need any of us school leaders telling her anything. She already knows because she's been to school. And that really annoys me because, the fact is that teaching and running a school are very different from being a child in school. And
Hmm.
too many people think that what we do is not a profession. It's not something that you have to be particularly skilled and
Yeah.
that you have to have experience, and the more experience you have the better you get at it, and so on. They just don't think that. They think anyone can waltz into a classroom and teach, and that it's the same for anyone, and I don't agree with that.
Why do they think that?
Because they've all been to school.
No, but what? Yeah,
um
no, yeah, true. Yeah.
they don't have any respect. I mean, that's the thing that really irks me here, is that she and others, she's not the only one, they just don't have, and the people who surround her, they don't have any respect for teachers and school leaders. If they did, I mean, imagine if I were on the board of a hospital. There's absolutely no way that I would be telling doctors and nurses and I don't know, the people who work in the ambulances and so on. I wouldn't be telling them what to do. I'd be asking them, how do you do your job? What is needed? What makes it easier for you to do your jobs well? What's the difference between a hospital that runs well and a hospital that runs badly? I wouldn't be telling them what's what. I mean, And that's just the bottom line. Either you believe that we should be told by politicians, or you think there's something in asking school leaders what works and what doesn't
I hear
work
you, but
from the ones,
wouldn't
you know.
there'll be some out there who, within education anyway, who will say, "But hey, Catherine, what about when the Conservatives were in and Gillian Keegan was there and Gavin Williamson and all these other people? Were you saying that then?"
Well, no, because they were speaking to school leaders. They were absolutely speaking to school leaders. And and they were having that conversation that is not being had right now at all. Bridget Phillipson has not been to visit, lots of successful schools and ask the successful school leaders what to do. She's not listening to us. She's not interested. And they've
Mm.
even put out an official statement to say she does not need lectures from anybody because she's lived it. That has never been the case with any of those conservative, and you might disagree with the things in the end they concluded on, because obviously teachers and school leaders will disagree. So you might disagree in the end with, say, what Michael Gove decided to do and the school leaders he decided to listen to, but he was definitely listening to school leaders. She is not. There's no one she can point to and say, these are the school leaders I've been talking to and this is what they've suggested. That's not what she's saying. Michael Gove can do that. And all of them can. She cannot. She has deliberately pushed out this bill without being informed by anyone.
But
There
she
isn't a
has,
single there
she
isn't a
has.
single school leader that will put their name to this bill to say that this is what they want. Not one.
Okay, I mean, I don't know. I don't know who's sort of supporting it or not supporting it. I mean, she has spoken to school leaders though. I mean, since she's taken the position of education secretary, and before that, she has consulted with school leaders. I mean, obviously,
Yes,
they may not
ones that
be
are not.
school leaders that you deem to be successful, perhaps. I don't know, but she's definitely spoken to them. I mean, I've seen her speaking to them. Do you know, not in
Yes,
person, but from a distance.
yes. So it depends on what you take successful to be. I mean, in my book, I think you should be speaking to at least a handful of successful school leaders.
Well,
Now,
tell me
you
what
might
you
say it doesn't
define.
matter.
Tell me what you define in that sense as a
Well,
successful.
there are a variety of different measures. You could look at the measure of progress aid and maybe take the top 20 of the ones on progress aid and visit a number of those. You could look at the schools that have done an extraordinary job with big disadvantaged intakes, again with progress aid, and look to see how much progress they've made. You could look just at attainment and see, well, which schools have got really great attainment and go and visit a handful of those. I mean, if I were in her position, I'd be taking 5 to 10 schools from each one of those categories, and I'd be speaking to all of those school leaders in their schools. Then I would bring all those school leaders together and I'd be talking to them again. That's the sort of thing that, say, Michael Gove did do. He went round and visited various schools and he spoke to lots of school leaders. Now, in the end, of course, you have to make, I understand you're not going to please everybody, but you will have spoken to these people and at least considered what they think. This is not the case with Bridget Phillipson. She has not spoken to anyone. And the bill is not informed by school leaders' opinions. As I say, there isn't a single school leader who's saying, "Oh yeah, she spoke to me, and that's my idea. Yeah, I think that's a good idea because we're struggling with X or we're struggling with Y, and by her doing this, this is going to make it easier for us." Not one is going to say that. So and we've got 23,000 schools. Um, and yet there are a number of school leaders who are saying, no, 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 this is a bad idea. And she's not listening. So, this is, we're just talking about who she is as a person. I don't really, I mean, we can spend most of
Yeah,
our
I mean
time
that
really
was
talking
just
about the issues of the
yeah, I
bill.
mean that was just quite a trite sort of personal. Is it purely personal observation from me from a distance that you know she seems all right as a person, which is I agree with you. Like in some ways, that's completely irrelevant to like what we're discussing now. But I just thought I'd throw it in there.
Yeah. Well,
uh,
as I say, I don't know. You can be nice, but if you're not even willing to listen to the people who are doing the job,
but
I have to say, you
Catherine, the
know,
only thing I would say is I hear you, but I don't believe. It's difficult though to say that people like Gillian Keegan and Gavin Williamson and various other people did the same thing. It's very difficult to look at that and say they listened to school leaders and teachers. It's quite
well,
difficult.
a number of those people. I mean, there were so many education secretaries. Some of them were
Well,
they were just there.
there's a question for you. Has an education secretary ever really truly listened to a bulk of teachers and school leaders in
Yeah, I think
what
Michael
they've done?
Gove did. The thing is, you've got to look and you've got to think. Kit Mulhouse, for instance, was an education
Yeah.
secretary. Well, he didn't do anything, so who cares? If you're an education secretary and you don't do anything, well, then I suppose it doesn't matter if you're not listening to school leaders. If you
Yeah.
come in and do stuff and you do big things, because she's doing some really big things here, if you're going to make some big changes, then one, there has to be a reason for making those changes. There has to be a problem that you're trying to solve. Two, you should be taking advice on whether or not you should be doing that. So Michael Gove made lots of changes and he did take lots of advice. Now, admittedly, there are some who disagreed and some who, not everybody thinks in the same way, but he most definitely spoke to lots of school leaders.
But could you argue, though, that Bridget Phillipson, she did ask for that meeting with you, right? So she did
Yes.
go,
I mean, she didn't listen to a word I was saying.
No, but by doing that, she didn't have to do that.
Yes, and she gave me 30 minutes. I was told very clearly at the beginning, you've only got 30 minutes. There's no way. Remember when you and I spoke about doing this
Yeah.
event? I said, well, how long are we going to have? Because it takes a long time. And that's with you as a teacher. If I'm going to explain this to a non-teacher, you need a couple of hours, right?
Okay.
You need her to come and see the school. You need her to make an effort and go and visit the schools. She hasn't been, and it's not just Michaela. She hasn't been to Mercia. She hasn't been to Q3. She hasn't been to any of these schools that are doing really well and that have done well thanks to the freedoms that we have as academy leaders. And she's not interested in finding out why it is we've done well or even seeing our schools. She said that to me. She actually said in the meeting, well, I go to see the schools that aren't doing so well because those schools deserve to have people visiting them. Which, the fact is, I don't have a problem with her visiting those schools, but I do find it odd that those are the only schools you're going to visit. I mean, that's just weird. It's a weird mindset to think I'm going to go and see the schools that aren't doing very well. And I'm not going to go and see the schools that are doing well. And I'm not going to speak to those school leaders. It makes no sense to me. Yeah. So she may be nice, but we should expect more from our education secretary.
Katharine, I knew me starting off with that. I knew you'd love that when I started off with that about her being nice.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded programme helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Yeah, well, we should expect more. What I find often is that teachers they don't have enough respect for themselves. So it's not just that other people look at us and go, well, you're just a teacher, and we know what to do better than you do for your schools. It's that we teachers ourselves don't expect much of how people treat us. And we go, well, she's nice enough, so that's good enough for me. And I just think, well, why is that good enough for you, Tom? It shouldn't be good enough. You should expect more of your education secretary.
No, I mean, me on a personal level, I definitely do. I mean, I would expect a hell of a lot. I mean, I'd be the same, I guess. Obviously, I don't know. I just, I want to. I don't know. It's tough, isn't it? I mean, who could do that job well? I mean, would you ever want to do it, education secretary, if someone asked you to?
Well, I'm not much of a politician, and I like children, and I like running my school. But there are a number of people. I mean, Wes Streeting, for instance, put him in there any minute, any day. I'd be very happy. I mean,
Okay, that's interesting. Why is that though?
because he's someone who listens. He g- he
Yeah.
goes into the hospitals. He finds out what's going on. He talks to people. You know, he's a reasonable guy. He's not somebody who's saying, I know best because I once went to have a heart surgery, right? I know how to run hospitals because I once went to the doctor. That is not what he's saying, right? She,
Mm,
however, is actually saying exactly that, right?
mm,
She's lived it.
mm. Okay. I mean, we'll move on from Bridget Phillipson in a minute because I want to talk to you about this thing, this march, this campaign, this protest, right? But before we get on to
Yeah.
that, do you think like? And again, tell me, Catherine, if I'm wrong here. Like, literally, you can shoot me down, no problem at all. Has it got like because of that meeting? Do you think it's got a bit personal though with you and Bridget Phillipson? Is that or
No.
no?
No, Bridget Phillipson, look, what has she done? She's trying desperately just to stay out of it's to stay quiet, right? She's not talking about the bill. They're just pushing it through. And they're pushing it through quietly while the rest of us are asleep. That's what they're doing. What her job is to keep quiet while this just gets pushed through with their majority, because the more noise we make, the more of a pain she becomes to Keir Starmer. That's how politics works for anybody. It's not just her. When the prime minister puts people in positions of ministers and so on, he wants them to just get on with the job quietly, especially when you have a huge majority, and then they can just push things through and nobody says anything. They become an annoyance to the prime minister when people are agitated and making noise. So that's what I'm doing. I'm making noise deliberately because I'm trying to say, hello, there are people here who she's not listening to. And I know that there are a number of school leaders who perhaps don't have my platform or are just a bit too frightened to say anything. They're not able to say anything. And I'm speaking on behalf of them in order to get somebody to listen. Because if we don't make any noise, this bill just goes through and nobody's listened to any of us. Our lives completely change, the schools completely change, and in 10 years when we look back and go, gosh, what happened to our schools, why have they all fallen apart, we then realize, oh, you can work it back to this bill. It's just that nobody ever said anything at the time. So I'm trying to say something here because I feel it's my duty to do so, because I have a little bit more freedom to be able to do so. Not all head teachers are in my position to be able to say anything, and I'm trying to make enough noise so that people take notice. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people don't realize how many bills are being pushed through Parliament on all kinds of things right now. And because Labour has a massive majority, they're pushing through loads of stuff that lots of people would think, hey, wait a minute, I don't necessarily agree with that. But because we're all busy with work, we don't realize what's going on. And I would argue that there are many teachers who have no idea what's necessarily going on, even with this particular bill, this schools bill. They don't know because people are busy marking their books and teaching their classes. And I get it. But the fact is that this is how things change without us even realizing. And then we look back and we go, wait, what happened? And suddenly it's gone.
All right. Well, listen, you've launched this. You've called it the March for Children. So it's a
Yes.
specific protest, right? So do you want to just talk us through, and we'll dig into each thing in more detail. But if you just outline first the key things that you're annoyed about at the moment.
Yeah, well, let me talk about the school stuff because I think the people on this
Yeah.
call would be teachers,
Yeah.
So let's talk about the school stuff because we have made it more general than that, to include, say, home educators, for
Okay.
instance, who are very much against the bill for the reasons that it takes some of their freedoms away. Fine, that's a separate thing, but they are definitely involved in this. But let me talk about the school stuff. So. Um, let's take uniform as one thing, as an example. And here's an example of where somebody, the education secretary, she has no idea about the importance of uniform. So what she's saying is we can only have three branded items of uniform. And she will be, she is thinking, I know she's thinking, she said this when we spoke, well, uniform's expensive and some families can't afford uniform. And so it's best to reduce the expense on families, which is a noble reason for wanting to do away with branded items in the
Yeah.
uniform. Um, Now, I too, as most school leaders, if not all school leaders, want to keep uniform costs down. Our uniform, for instance, costs £76. And you can get it, I'd say, for around about £20 secondhand at our school, which I think is pretty good. If you can get a uniform for 20 quid, I think it's pretty good. And then you need to weigh up, well, is the saving of a few pounds, you might bring it down to 16 or 17 pounds instead of 20, is that saving of a few pounds worth it for the damage that's caused for not having as many branded items? So why do you need lots of branded items? And I say lots. I mean, we've got 5 on our actual uniform. Now, because we don't have a sports hall and we don't have any fields or grass or trees or anything, our sports offer is very, very limited. And so we do not have a sports uniform for that reason. But most schools do have an amazing sports offer, and I wish we could. Sadly, we're unable to because of our building. But for those schools that have an amazing sports offer, they will not be able to have a branded school sports uniform. And I would argue that even on the main uniform, so we have 5 branded items of uniform, and we've kept it to the absolute minimum deliberately because I don't want families to spend more money than they need to. So we have the blazer, the sweater, the bag, the tie, and the trouser. Now, why do I feel it's necessary to brand all those items? And that's 5 items when it just comes to the uniform, let alone sports, which most schools will want to brand on their sports uniform. So why do I think those 5 are necessary? Okay, well, it would be very odd if you didn't have a blazer branded. You would just all look, you would be wearing different blazers. You'd be, I mean, it would be absurd. In order to, I mean, if I need to explain, so, to belong to your school, just like you belong to the English football team, you wear the same clothes. You're part of something. You belong to something. And I know that Bridget Phillipson actually very much believes that children should belong to their school, but she doesn't understand just how crucial uniform is to that sense of belonging. So your blazer, you definitely need that. The sweater, same thing. If you were all wearing different sweaters underneath your blazer, you would look like you came from different schools. And you wouldn't have that uniformity that is required for belonging. Now, I have to say, actually, our sweater is not mandatory. You don't have to wear the sweater. You can wear it without, but you do have to wear your blazer. Now, there is the trousers. Now, why do I think we need a branded trouser? I think this is so important for schools. And for those of you in schools where you don't have a branded trouser, I would highly recommend it, but we're about to have a bill that's going to stop you from doing it. So, I would say that girls often get trousers. Let's say they say any gray pair of trousers will work. The girls will buy trousers that are very tight, and then they sexualize themselves by wearing a very tight pair of trousers, which I think is inappropriate for girls to be wearing. And in the day and age where Keir Starmer has rightly pointed out the misogyny that can exist in schools, the horrible stuff that boys and girls are exposed to online. Well, one way in which this is demonstrated in schools is via what they wear. So it's important for girls not to be wearing those trousers that sexualize them. Similarly, the boys have their trousers pulled down in a way that heightens their masculinity. I think that it's deeply uncomfortable. To allow children that kind of ability to sexualize themselves with their trousers. If you have a branded trouser, so something, we have our little leaf on the side, something so that teachers can note, oh, that's our trouser. Then the trousers are made in such a way so that the kids can't do that, and therefore your children are safer. In terms of their sex, the sexuality that they portray in the way that they walk around and the way in which they show off their their legs and so on. So I think that's really important that you have the trouser and then the bag. So we have our big leaf on the back of the back on the backpack. When they're down the street, we can see them way far away. So just again, in terms of safeguarding, really important to be able to note who your kids are. If there's a issue down the road, some kind of scuffle, whatever's going on, you can see whether or not your kids are involved. The CCTV on the on the roads again can pick up our kids immediately with that bag. If you don't have the bag branded, then you can't tell who your kids are. So what have I? Oh, and the tie. So the tie. Again, this is advice for teachers who are listening. You have we have the leaf on there positioned in a very specific place so that if the teachers cannot see the leaf, we know the tie is too short. And as we all know, shortened fat ties are a huge problem in
I tell you
schools.
what, Catherine, I'd be in
And
so much trouble with you, as a member of staff. I mean, I'm
why?
relatively smart, but I'd be in so much trouble. I mean, I wear a nice suit, I've got a nice tie, etc. But and I always wear a suit. But I
Yeah.
mean, the length of tie thing. I mean, that's
But I'm talking about the kids. Yeah, right. The kids have short, fat ties, right? And you want to make sure that the ties are long. So you have your little emblem on there to make sure that and the staff can tell. Because the point is, staff need to be able to, in a quick second, look at the uniform and be able to know whether or not the child is wearing the correct uniform. And so
But why does the
the
length
fact
of
is,
tie why does the style or length of the tie
okay,
matter
because
in?
when children are smart. So when you come to visit our school, and if you go to visit all of the successful schools will have kids that look smart in uniform, right?
Yeah,
Like this isn't just a coincidence. It's not just, oh, isn't it funny how the good schools all have great uniform? Like that isn't a coincidence. The reason is because if kids are smart, we have smart on the outside, smart on the inside. They feel proud of themselves. They're able to walk with with real pride and dignity. We don't allow coats on inside the building, for instance, deliberately, so the kids can show off their blazers and their badges that go down the side. And there's a real sense of pride in them because of their uniform. And their uniform is immaculate at Michaela. That isn't just a coincidence. We wouldn't get the results we get if our uniform were a mess. Okay, there's no question.
no, I
Um,
get that. I mean, I'm more talking about specific thing there. The tie example is a good example. The tie, the style, the length of the tie. Why does that specifically matter? I mean, I'm not saying uniform necessarily doesn't matter.
okay, so it's what I just said. So in the same ways, you might say, well, why does it matter if their shirts are not tucked in? It matters. What they look like matters, right? If they look a mess, they are not going to perform at the same level as they would do if they looked smart. It's really important that the kids be smart. It's really important that we hold our standards high. And in fact, and so this is something, for instance, my arguments over the point about uniform, look, We at Michaela will survive if we have to cut the leaf on the tie, for instance. We'll survive. Okay. And we'll survive because we've already got our sense of belonging and we've already got our culture. I'm arguing this for all of you guys. I'm doing this for all of you. Okay. And the schools that need to turn around their poor behavior. If you're already a good school with excellent behavior and excellent uniform, those schools will survive this point on the bill. It's the schools, so we get over 800 visitors every year. Every time, every day, I speak to the visitors downstairs, and the advice I give them is they all say, got issues with behavior. And I say, right, so what you need to do is start with uniform. And they call this broken windows theory, that you look after the pennies, the pounds take care of themselves. You look after the small things. So like when you're saying, but what difference does the tie make? The tie makes all the difference. Okay. So I used to be a deputy in a school in South London. We used to have fire alarms that would go off 2, 3 times a week. The kids would pull them. There were fights in the classrooms and in the corridors. It was an absolute state. I was complaining for ages to my head. My head eventually said, fine, you take behavior, you do something with it. So I immediately dealt with uniform. The same idea, broken windows theory. And I didn't bring out, I wasn't looking at detentions or point systems or merit systems or anything like that. All I dealt with was uniform. And I brought consistency across the school with uniform to get everybody singing from the same hymn sheet. And one of the big things we did was making sure the ties were long, making sure the shoes, the shirts were tucked in, making sure everybody had sensible shoes, making sure that the earrings, the big hoop earrings that they used to wear, would disappeared. Um, we went after uniform. I remember saying to my head teacher, listen, in 6 months, you're going to see a complete transformation. Well, I was wrong. The school had transformed in 6 weeks. It was amazing. I never touched merits and demerits. I never touched any of the behavior stuff. All I did was uniform, and all those fire alarms stopped. The fights stopped. All of that stopped. And all I did was deal with uniform. If you take care of the pennies, the pounds take care of themselves. So whenever all these guests come, I'm always advising them on how to deal with uniform. Well, I'm not going to be able to do that in the same way anymore. Once this bill goes through, those schools will have a much harder time turning around their difficult behavior.
With
So,
the uniform though on the schools bill, the thing was they said there would be a limit, right, on branded items. So they said
yes.
the bill will ban schools from requiring parents to buy more than 3 branded items as part of the school uniform. So it includes 3. And the rationale they've put behind that is that when they surveyed the parents, half of parents were concerned about the cost of uniform, and 12% said they've been in financial hardship as a result. So that's the rationale behind it. I guess I'm just saying,
Yes.
because there's 2 sort of debates here. There's the debate about uniform or not, right, which is, to me, is one
Hmm.
debate, and there'll be lots of teachers out there who are generally pretty pro uniform, and pro sort of uniform standards. There'll be some that aren't, but there'll be a lot who are. But the branded thing is, I think
Yes,
that's a separate debate, isn't it, to uniforms? That's saying,
but Tom, I've just explained why it is we need all of those items being branded. And that's 5 items for our uniform. And I haven't even moved on to sport yet, right?
mm, mm.
So I've explained, if you don't have it on the bag, that's a safeguarding issue for the kids. You can't find them on the street. If you don't have it on the blazer, well, then obviously you're not a school. If you don't have it on the sweater, same thing. If you don't have it on the trousers, the kids sexualize themselves. And if you don't have it on the tie, then you have short, fat ties where they're basically putting 2 fingers up to you and not obeying the rules for uniform. And they look like a mess. So those are the 5 things. I have kept it to an absolute minimum at Michaela for exactly the same reasons as they're saying. I don't want to charge the parents more than I have to. And we are charging, as I say, £76. But a secondhand uniform is £20. And schools will often have, for families really in dire trouble, financial trouble, they will have grants for uniform so that people can get the uniform for free. So when she says she's trying to solve this problem, well, what is the problem? I wouldn't mind if she said, okay, you have to have a limit of expense. It can't be more than £200 or whatever it is, right? That I wouldn't mind. But to attack the branded items, I have a problem with that because she does not understand how important it is to have those different branded items. And if she were to speak to successful school leaders, I've just given you my rationale for why it is we need to have those branded items. I'm a successful school leader for a reason. I understand these things. I've implemented these things, not just at my current school, but at other schools where I used, 20 years ago, I've done this and I've turned around failing behavior in a school, totally turned it around by using uniform. I've also know of other school leaders who have done the same thing. So either people want to listen to us and say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that uniform was so important when it comes to turning around poor behavior. Now, you're not going to see the effect of this right away. In 10 years, when the behavior in our schools has plummeted, we're all going to say, I wonder why. Well, we're going to have to look back to this moment and say, oh, I see, we changed uniform. That didn't seem like such a big deal at the time. But because we reduced the number of branded uniform items, that will have impact on our behavior across the country. And as I say, this isn't a personal thing for me because we'll survive it at Michaela. Other schools will not. So that's uniform. We can move on to another thing.
Yeah, just before we do that, on the uniform thing, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not a massive most research out there finds little to no direct impact when it comes to uniforms on academic achievement. And if you look at like other countries where uniforms are much less common, if not used at all, it's not affecting their sort of overall outcomes in comparison, to example, to the UK. I'm not saying that's
Okay.
an
That's
argument for us to ditch uniforms. I'm just saying
okay, well, hang on. So that's an interesting point that you're making there about other countries that don't use uniform. I don't know what you mean about the studies because all of my experience in all schools, go and visit any successful school and you'll find good uniform. It's the number one piece of advice I give to friends when they say, "Where should I send my child to school?" And I say, "Stand outside the various schools and see the kids when they come out of school. What does their uniform look like? If it looks like a mess, then I wonder about what's going on inside the school. If they look smart, then that tells you at least something about what's going on inside the school." But with regard to school to countries where they
I
don't
mean,
have uniform,
the studies. So here's some examples: Brunsmore and Rockamore, 98, 2003, found no significant links between uniforms and academic achievement. Gentile and Immerman, 2012, modest improvements. Education Endowment Foundation in the UK, quote, uniforms have a low impact on learning outcomes according to their teaching toolkit. UK Children's Society report.
okay, well, I'd like to see the details of that because, as
Well,
I
yeah,
say, you
I'm
go and
just
visit the successful schools and you'll find excellent uniform, right? Um, but and also, it's about results, but it's also about the happiness of the children. It's the safety of the children. It's the safeguarding of the children walking down the street. I mean, it's not just about results. It's also about the sexualization of children. These are the things that I was just talking about. Those are the main things. But I also think when children are happy, then they're more likely to get excellent results, which is why the schools that have excellent results have excellent uniform. But your point about other countries, which is an interesting point, um, that point is if you do not have uniform, that is fine. That's a different thing from having a uniform that is undermined all the time. Yes? So what I always say to people is if you're going to have a uniform, you need to make sure that it works for you. Otherwise, don't have a uniform at all, right? Because if you don't have a uniform at all, then the kids aren't constantly breaking the rules.
yeah.
If you have a tie and you've told the children, so this is a really interesting point because you were saying, what's the point? Why do we have to have? Why do we care what the tie looks like? Okay, so if when year sevens start, if you look at the year sevens in your school, they will have long ties.
Yeah.
And then over time, they start to shorten their ties and they make their ties fat and short because that's what's cool. And that's their way of putting two fingers up to the school and to the teachers. That's what they're doing when they're doing that. They're saying, I know you've told me to make it long, but I'm not going to. I'm going to do it my way. Now, when you allow kids to get away with little stuff all of the time, the bad kids, the naughty kids, need to stand out. They have to go even further than that. So if everybody has short ties, then they think, well, what do I have to do? I have to have a big fight to stand out, to show that I'm badder than the next kid, right? because everybody has fat ties. If everyone has long ties, then to demonstrate that you're a bad boy, you or girl, I mean, I say bad boy as an expression, it doesn't have to be a boy. Um, in order to demonstrate that you're a bad boy, you can make your tie fat. But when everyone has fat ties and that has been normalized, a culture of undermining the school has been normalized. What you're saying to the kids is, I know we have rules, but we don't expect you to follow the rules, so it's okay. And then when you say to them another rule, we want you to be quiet in your lessons, they think, well, you didn't really mean it when it came to the ties, so I don't suppose you really mean it when it comes to being quiet in my lessons. You see, if you have uniform, you need to enforce uniform. If you don't have uniform at all, so in Canada they don't have uniform, well,
Yeah.
fine. That's okay. I'm not criticizing those
Yeah.
schools.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. Yeah.
okay,
No, I get
right?
that. That's what I was getting at. Is that part of it in terms of if there's no uniform, then that's the rule, isn't it? That there's no uniform. So
That's
you
right.
what you're saying is you just want whatever the rules are to be followed and followed properly.
I'm
Like
saying if you have uniform, you need to allow more items. Now, I have to say, if you had to ask me which one's better, a school with a uniform and without a uniform, I think you're better with a uniform because, as I've just said, it's safeguarding in the street. You're better off with that. The sexualization of the trousers, you're better off with choosing their trousers. And not only that, but we all know that if you don't have a uniform, and this is the case in Canadian schools, which I've seen, um, the richer kids can buy the branded items like Gucci and etc. And the
yeah,
poorer kids cannot. And so actually it becomes a far more expensive affair in kids being humiliated for not having certain branded items at school. Branded, not uniform, but branded in terms of you know uh, uh, you know uh, the high street type brands. And they can't possibly afford that, and it actually makes things much worse. The
well,
thing about uniform is that it equalizes things for kids, and the poor kids, you don't see who they are.
but would kids just always push boundaries no matter what sort of uniform or not uniform you had? You could have the most particular uniform policy ever, and kids would still find a way of
Of course. But that's the whole point. That's why
yeah.
you have to have a strict uniform, because that allows them to push back without them really undermining the school or the ethos or the teachers. That's why. Be strict with your uniform, and I promise you, your behavior will transform in your schools for the better. I mean, for all the teachers who are listening.
Let's move on,
Um,
Catherine,
so
because
let's
there's
move
so
on.
much
Yes.
else in this, right? So, I
Yes.
mean, that was really interesting to kick off on the
Yes.
uniform thing. So, great, we've covered that. So, the other thing
Yes.
that you've mentioned was smartphones, right?
Yes.
So,
So that isn't in the bill, but I
yeah,
mean, smartphones, which the government refuses to have a national conversation about, is my opinion that smartphones should be banned to kids who are under 16. But I would take something else. There are other options. You could ban social media to under 16s, as they've done in Australia. You could. We could talk. We could have a national conversation around this. Now, I have to say, more recently, there are a number of parental groups that have started up that are anti-smartphone because they are finally coming to see the damage that unsupervised access to the internet does. I have been shouting about this for about 8 or 9 years, and I've been shouting about it. It's so fascinating because we on Friday I went to give a little talk to our year 13s who are going off on study leave, and and I and one our head girl, I was saying, "Oh my goodness, isn't it amazing how you're going off now?" Because when she was in year 7, in fact, I need to put this on Twitter. The BBC came in and did a little video of us, campaigning against smartphones, and we have a thing called digital detox where the kids give us their phones and they in order to keep them off their phones. And she was in my office when she was in year 7, talking about against smartphones, and here she is now in year 13, going off to do her exams. And so I looked at her, and it was so funny because that morning I had been on Good Morning Britain talking about smartphones. And I was saying to all of them, gosh, I feel like Groundhog Day. This is just unbelievable. 7 years ago, you were in year seven in my office, and we were talking to the BBC about being against smartphones. And this morning, here I am on Good Morning Britain, still talking against smartphones. So the country really hasn't moved in the last 7 years. And I wish it bloody well would. I mean, I say that recently
Mm.
it is I have noticed a lot more traction, but unfortunately the government is not listening on this.
I mean,
I would
the guidance from February 2024, the government guidance does state, quote, all schools should prohibit the use of mobile phones throughout the school day, not only during lessons, but break and lunch times as well.
yes,
That's what the
yes, but
current
that
guidance
should.
says.
Yeah, but that should. You see, so look,
Mm.
first of all, it's not just about phones in schools. It's about phones full stop. So we
Right.
strongly encourage our families not to give the children smartphones at all, right?
Okay.
And we sell brick phones for that purpose.
Yeah, no, I remember. Yeah, I remember you
And
saying
we
that.
sell them at a loss. You know, I actually lose money on these phones. Now, I don't just think it's just about schools, but the fact is, we all know that it is very hard to ban phones in schools. So again, this is an issue which affects very much affects other schools much more than it does Michaela. We have got that situation under control. You never see a phone at Michaela. It is very rare to see a phone. Very rare to hear a phone. Every now and again, you might hear a beep, because a kid has left it on by mistake in his bag or something. I mean, it's very rare. But I know that most schools do struggle with this sort of thing, and that even schools that ban phones, the kids will still take them out in various lessons. That the teachers are under a lot of stress trying to deal with that. We will all know of schools where head teachers are under the impression that the phones are banned, and that in fact you'll find if you go through the school that you'll see phones out and about sometimes. You'll see their earphones in. You'll see them with their phones out in the
Mm.
corridors and at
Mm.
break time and at lunchtime where they're not talking to each other, and that this is a common occurrence. Not only that, but you also know of lots of schools, especially in the private sector, where they're all on Chromebooks and on iPads in their lessons, and that this ed tech has sort of taken over, and that the old fashioned writing, reading in lessons is gradually disappearing. I think that this is a great shame, and
Is it a problem?
is really quite
That's an
worrying.
interesting one that Catherine at the end about the writing point is.
Mm,
I mean, like me personally, I don't know about you, but me personally,
hmm
I will probably use a pen now to write for less than 5% of anything that I do, right? The
hmm
remaining 95% is touch typing, right?
Yes.
So, is there not an argument there to say that we need to move further in a direction towards that when it comes to that side of things? I mean, that's a bit separate, I guess, to smartphones. But you mentioned writing. I'm not suggesting don't teach children how to write. All I'm saying is the reality is that most of the adults that I know, I'm not saying they'd have as high a percentage as
Uh,
me, but they'd have a
okay, but
high
let me
percentage.
Okay, but let me just stop you there. You just said you're not suggesting don't teach children how to write. Well, as you know, being a teacher, there are many children who leave school really not being able to write properly.
Hmm.
You have to do tons and tons of reading and writing if you want all your children to leave school being proficient at
Yeah,
both.
yeah.
And that's all we do. We don't have any iPads. We don't do any of that stuff. Our children are very adept on computers and are very good on phones and so on. You don't
Mhm.
have to teach them that stuff. You do have to teach them the reading and the writing. And our children, there isn't a single child who leaves our school not being able to read and write really well. And that is because we do it over and over and over again in the lessons. And you have to, especially if you have kids coming from deprived communities, because otherwise they're just never going to learn how to do it. So I just think the smartphone thing, I mean, there are kids who are dying. I mean, I just like when I say dying, they're the TikTok pranks. There's these mums at the moment who are trying to get information from TikTok to find out what their child was doing just before he did a prank on TikTok and then died, right? I mean, kids are dying, honestly, and they can't get anywhere. I mean, I just, I mean, honestly, notice I can barely speak because the thing so upsets me that these poor mothers whose children children are dead because of the unsupervised access to the internet that we're not allowed to talk about. I mean, for goodness sakes, we need to stop children having unsupervised access to the internet. It is putting their lives at risk, literally putting their lives at risk, and let alone the gang members that they meet, the horrible, I mean, girls who get involved with men who are so much older than them, pedophiles who are targeting various kids who know where they live. Who, I mean, I'm anybody who's involved in safeguarding and who's on a senior team, they know what I'm talking about, right? So the fact is, it is such a dangerous place from a physical point of view. But then there's their mental health. Jonathan Haidt has written massively about this, that they are all suffering. The girls who have to pout their lips and push out their bottoms and make themselves look so much older, and that the only way that they can be appreciated is through what they look like as opposed to their brains and the things that they've achieved. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer. Those smartphones and unsupervised access to the internet needs to be spoken about and needs to be stopped for kids. We don't allow them alcohol. We don't allow them sex. We don't allow them marriage and driving and smoking. These things have been made illegal for children. Smartphones should also be made illegal for children because it is a massive danger to them, and they are too young and naive to know. And parents don't realize, and it's such a great sort of babysitter for families. I get it. You're busy. You're making dinner. You've got 3 other kids. Things are going on. You just hand them a phone and they just get on with things. And nowadays, toddlers have phones. And then we wonder why they never learn how to read. Look, it is just a book cannot compete with a smartphone. It just can't. All those colors and flashes and changing pages, black and white. A book is flat. You have to make a huge effort to be able to read a page. And as us secondary school teachers know, they come to us at 11 years old and they really don't know how to read. One of the big reasons for that is because of access to that smartphone. So again, I just think government should be open to having that discussion. They are not open to it. And I think there are lots of reasons for this, which, big reasons is to do with those massive companies where these guys are making billions out of our ignorance on this. They're flying around in private jets, and our parents are having to save up loads of money to give their child a birthday present of an iPhone when in fact that iPhone is going to destroy their lives. So, I mean, I could go on for hours about it. The whole thing, we should move on to
No, I
something
mean,
else because that makes me so upset. Honestly, it's just so
well,
dangerous
you
and
have
so awful.
you have the ban. I mean, almost half the UK public believe there should be a total ban on smartphones in schools. I think I mean, listen, this is an open forum, by the way. If anybody has a view on anything we've been talking about so far and wants to share it, then just hit the microphone icon in the bottom left, and if you have something to say, we'll bring you in.
Yeah, well, that's nice to hear 50%. I have to say,
Yeah,
7 years ago when I was talking about it, nobody was backing me. Everybody just thought I was insane, right?
that
So
may have been
eventually now
less than
people are getting there.
had them then, though. I think with smartphone maybe use it
Well,
has gone up
because
massively.
people don't know. You see, what the things I say, I'm only saying them because I can see them. Because I see it in front of my face. And so I talk about what I see as harming children.
But I
Not
must say,
having
Catherine,
uniform items.
coming back to what I said at the start of this little segment, though, is that most schools do already have bans on them. Like, to be fair, they do, don't they? Like
Yeah,
most.
I know, but listen, you got to see it from a head teacher's point of view, okay? So, uh, a head teacher, depending on what they're like. So, if you're the strictest headmistress in Britain and you're completely unreasonable in the way that I am, then it is much easier to enforce that ban, okay? If you're a head teacher who isn't like me, right? It's hard. It's very hard to enforce this ban. If, on the other hand, okay, for instance, as a head teacher, I do not have trouble with kids bringing in bottles of vodka to school. I do not have problems with them driving their father's car to school. I do not have problems with them having sex in the corridors, right? Now, that is because it's illegal, right? And so, because it's been made illegal, it has been normalized across the country that children don't tend to drink. Now, I'm not saying there aren't a few here and there who are trying it out. Of course, there are, but it's illegal. And so, that helps a head teacher in imposing that ban. He doesn't have to spend all his time thinking, how do I persuade the parents? How do I persuade the teachers? How do I get the kids to follow this ban? Right? It's very hard to enforce. Now, some schools manage it, but lots of schools do not manage it. And if there were a ban coming from central government, if it was made illegal, then it would be much easier for schools to ban it. That's the point. It makes it easier for teachers and for head teachers.
Mm.
Um, Now, I'm not saying it's impossible to do. Of course not. I am one who has managed to do it, right? I'm just aware that it's not always so easy. And I have a small school. I have a new school. If you take over a school of 2,000 kids with over 100 teachers, banning phones is hard. Now, you will no doubt point and say, "Look, there's this school that's done it." Okay, that head is exceptional, right? I'm saying if we want this happening across all our 23,000 schools, it would be much easier if it were made illegal. And it's not just about in school, it's also about at home. And the
But
reason why,
how would you respond to the argument that it's more about parental responsibility rather than something that the government should legislate?
yes, now it's a good point. But the thing is, I would say that we could make alcohol legal for kids, but we don't. We don't say, well, that's just up to parents. We did once upon a time. We did once upon a time when it came to smoking. But then, because the evidence that was so overwhelmingly demonstrated how dangerous these things were for children, that we then used our legal system to ban this for children. So I do think that there's a role for government. I am not a crazy libertarian just saying freedom for everybody. We shouldn't, forget about government. Government shouldn't exist. I think there's a role for government. And I think this is a role for government and I know there are families, a lot of my followers, for instance, get very angry with me and they say, why are you saying that, that's parents should parent, is what they say. And I always think, well, if you're a single mom, you've got 2 jobs, you've got 4 kids at home, it's very difficult to do that. And fine, if you're a mom at home and dad goes out to work every day and you've got 2 children, it's much easier for you to be able to do it. So I don't want to rid them of their responsibilities, but I do recognize that parents, just like head teachers, need support with this because it is so addictive and it's so it's everywhere, isn't it? Like it's so hard to get that phone under wraps, and I think we need help from the law. But
Chris has called in. Chris, do you want to share a point?
Yeah, I think Catherine's absolutely right. I think it's hard to impose that in secondary schools, and I know the conversation is mostly about the secondary bills, but think about the primary schools as well. Teachers in primary schools are having to cope with certain children in year 6, maybe even year 5 now, that got full access to phones. And I think if you ban it from the secondary schools, then that filters down to the primary schools, and the children that see their older brother, older sister on their phones or taking their phones to school that go to primary schools, surely, primary schools as well need help in this. And consequently, if you do ban them, it will filter down. It takes time, right? But it will filter down and it'll help the primary school heads as well.
Thanks. Yeah.
absolutely, I'm not suggesting not. I'm saying under 16, so that includes all the
But are
primary
you
age
saying,
kids.
Catherine, just to be clear, are you saying ban smartphones full stop for under 16s in and out
Yes.
of school, unsupervised
Yes.
access?
Yes. Now, look, I recognize that is a rather extreme position to take. I get that not everybody will agree with me on that. That is my position. I would accept the middle road of banning social media, for instance, for children, or banning them in schools, for instance. There are alternatives that are not as extreme as my position, but yes, my belief is we should be banning them for kids under the age of 16.
There is that.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded programme helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Argument of like smoking's a good analogy is everybody sort of thought that was all right for ages, and then obviously further down the line they were like, this isn't really all right, and then they started, and now we would take it for granted, a little bit like when the smoking ban in restaurants and bars and restaurants came in, and people just started doing it, and then they stopped doing it, and it was almost like an easy transition.
Exactly.
Right, all those things.
Exactly, Tom. I remember. You youngsters won't remember, but I remember, the restaurants, the bars, there was smoke everywhere. And then suddenly this law came in and boom, overnight, it just disappeared. I actually said, I have to say, before that ban came out of restaurants, smoke in restaurants and so on, I thought to myself, well, it won't make any difference. Well, it transformed the country, that
Catherine,
law.
just to play devil's advocate though again, would you say then, because, okay, for example, I'm addicted to Diet Coke, right? I drink a huge amount of Diet Coke. Like, I can't get through the day without it. I know Yasmin's here. She's also addicted to it. There's like an addiction club of people, right? You could argue that that is as bad as that. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Or you could say, like, eating.
You're
like,
saying that drinking
eating, unhealthy eating would damage just as many kids as this.
Yes.
So would you ban that? Is there other things you would ban?
Well, if there was something that was threatening their lives, I suppose there are things that we're not allowed to feed kids, aren't there? There's a whole bunch of things that's illegal to feed them. I don't know. Jamie Oliver made it illegal. You have to follow certain rules in the kitchens. You can't put in too much salt or too much sugar and all kinds of things. So that is actually the case. It is illegal to feed the kids various foods, and rightly so. Yet we're allowed to give them a device that's going to that we have evidence for. Their mental health is suffering. Their safeguarding is at risk. I mean, it is such a no-brainer for me. Anyway, look, we need to move on because there's a million other things.
Yeah, go on to you've also mentioned academies. We've got quite a bit of a non-UK audience, Catherine, on the podcast version of what we do. We've got quite a few listeners from the USA and Australia and some other places. So I don't know whether you want to, before we get into it, just outline what academies are and sort of a bit of background on that, and maybe also what free schools are as well. Obviously, Michaela's a free school. So I don't know whether you want to just give a little 1 minute on where that comes from.
Yeah, well, free schools and academies just have freedoms to be able to do what's right for their own cohort. Free schools are slightly different in that they might have been set up by a group of people, but ultimately they run in the same way as an academy runs. The money comes directly to the academy or to the free school and is not given to the council, where they used to siphon off some of that money and then hand out the rest to the school. It now just comes directly to the school, and the school can do as they see fit with that money, to employ who they want, to organize themselves as however which way they want, really, depending on the intake that they've got. And my position is, clearly my school in inner city Wembley is very different to a school in the Cotswolds or a school up in the Lake District or a school in Hull. You know,
Mm.
there are different schools all over the country, and we're all we have different buildings, we have different challenges with our intakes, we have different staffing issues depending on where you are in the country. We just have different issues, and so we should be able to make the right decisions for what we need to do with our kids, because obviously we have different issues to deal
Right.
with.
So, what's your issue when it comes to the schools bill and academies? Then, do you want to outline that
Yeah,
part?
well, I mean, there's 2 points there. I'm not sure which
Yeah,
one you are imagining I'm
all
going to
of it.
talk about.
But you
So,
go for
okay,
whatever your issues are in that
so
broad spectrum.
okay, well, there's the Multi Academy Trust. At the moment, if a school is failing, the and again, this is something that will not affect us at Michaela. I have to say, most of the things that I'm arguing for, I think we may just get away with at Michaela. Most of the stuff I'm arguing for, I'm thinking about other schools, often schools that are in failing situations that need help. So they need help of the uniform. They need help to get their behavior to be better. And the really difficult, schools that are in challenging situations at the moment, what happens is a multi-academy trust, a MAT, will come and take over the school. And because the MAT has 50 odd schools or more, they have a number of people in their teams, and they can put together a team and put the team into that school, remove perhaps the head teacher, remove the deputies if necessary, depending, and and turn the school around. Now, I know lots of teachers will think, yeah, but academies are really bad. I hate my academy head, and I wish I didn't work for an academy. And I recognize that obviously the academy system isn't perfect, and that obviously there will be head teachers who some staff don't like, and so on. I get that. But that does not mean that we want to throw out the entire system of multi academy trusts. um, at the moment, what this bill will do, it will stop the Multi Academy Trust from going into the school and owning that school. So it belongs to that Academy Trust, and then turning it round and being held to account for the turnaround of that school. Instead, there are going to be these RISE teams made up of disparate people who will go in and advise schools that are struggling or that are failing, and saying, why don't you try this, why don't you try that? But there is no accountability. That's the key point there. And there is no ownership. So, to help people understand that this on the call, what does that look like? So, you imagine in your department, um, let's say you're an English teacher and you've got your head of department, your head of English. And the head of English meets with you regularly in department meetings, and all of you are together and you all talk about what you're doing for year 11 and what you're now doing at year 7 and so on. And you all share a common goal of raising the profile of the English department, of getting better results this year in your GCSE English. Fantastic. You're all working towards this common goal. Now, partly that's done by the head of department owning that department, feeling responsible and accountable for that department. They're held accountable by the head teacher. They're going to have to go and see the head teacher when the results come out and say, well, this is what we did and this is how it happened. And as they're coming towards that end of, towards the exams right now, they meet with the head teacher every now and again and they say, well, these are my plans and this is what we're doing. And the head teacher will ask about various staff members in the department and so on, right? There's the sense of ownership and accountability. Now, it's the same with a MAT. When a MAT takes over a school, there's an accountability there and there is an ownership. If, on the other hand, the equivalent of RISE teams going into a failing school to just advise, the equivalent in a school would be if, for instance, you had your English department, it's failing, it's not doing very well. But what happens is, and your head of department isn't very good, and you're not doing a very good job, and there's no real sense of oomph and challenge, and we're moving towards a certain kind of goal. None of that exists in the department. And then what they do is they get some English teachers from other schools in the nearby. And those English teachers every now and again pop in and they give the head of department some advice, and they give some advice to the teachers, and then they go away again, right? Now, that's nice, it's a nice thing, but it's the accountability and the ownership isn't there. because they pop in, they give some advice, and then they go away again, which is very different from the head of department being held to account by the teacher and the head of department feeling a sense of ownership over their department, right? It's the same thing with the mats. Now, whatever it is that we may think of it, a specific individual academy head that we don't like, fine. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist, and I'm not saying there aren't problems with certain academies, right? I'm saying that as a system of accountability and ownership, this is an excellent way of turning around schools. And that is what we've seen happen over the last decade and a half. Since all of these academies have happened, we have risen in the PISA tables. So we went from 21st to 7th in maths.
Oh, Catherine, I'm the biggest PISA cynic though in the world. I am. I can't.
Why are you a cynic?
Oh, I just can't. I think I'm a cynic of. I'm even a cynic of sort of league tables, exam outcomes, like measures of a 0.1 or a 0.2 on like a progress 8 or something like that. I'm even a cynic of that. But PISA, it's just kids do. Yeah,
Okay, even if you think,
because of the
I can
size of it, and
understand.
it's like a one-off. It's a one-off
Okay,
thing, isn't it? I just can't. Yeah.
but even if you think that, moving from 21 to 7th, it's massive. So I mean, I might understand if you were to say, look, 21st, 18th isn't such a big deal, right? But when you make such a landslide difference, in addition to that, we 20% of our kids used to leave school functionally illiterate and functionally innumerate a decade and a half ago. Now we are considered to have the highest reading results in the Western world, right? Now, again, massive increase, right? But not only that, okay, let's say you don't care about international, tests,
Mm.
fine. Let's say, but there is massive improvement, right? So I would expect you to give at least a nod to that, right? But imagine if you don't. Okay, we all know. We just know anecdotally about what's happening in schools. Those of us who are old enough. Now, the problem is a lot of us are too young to remember what it was like in 2007 and 8 and 9 and so on. We don't remember. I remember. I remember what schools were like. It was completely different. The landscape has totally changed. Not only that, but we have people from around the world, from Australia, from New Zealand, from America. They're all coming over here, visiting the various successful schools that are happening across England. And we can also see the difference between England and Scotland and Wales. Scotland and Wales do not have MATs. They do not have the academy program. Nobody's going to visit Scottish and Welsh schools. The kids are all failing there, right? The fact is that they're only coming to England to see. And whenever people come, so I get visitors to Michaela all the time from around the world. They're not just coming to see Michaela. They're always on a tour of England's best schools, right? So that never used to happen in 2005 and 6 and 7. They weren't coming here to see what we do. And if you compare England's results to Scotland's and to Wales, there's a massive difference. So, even if you want to reject the results, just anecdotally, talk to any of the older school leaders that you may know who run successful schools. They'll all tell you the same thing as I do. Things have transformed. So let me move on because I'm aware that we're running out of time. So that's the MAT point and the RISE teams, and MATs
Yeah.
really should be allowed to turn around failing schools. Then there is the QTS point. Now, the fact is that I have had over the years various unqualified teachers who have come to teach at Michaela. We teach them how to teach. They do a brilliant job. Now, special schools depend hugely on unqualified teachers. If special schools aren't allowed to have unqualified teachers, this is going to hit them badly. Now, the education secretary has wrote back a bit and gone, no, but it's okay. You just have to apply for them, and then you need to get them this bureaucratic stamp. And I do think it's a bureaucratic stamp. Now, the fact is, I've got, for instance, an economics teacher. He's young. He's 22 years old. He's just out of university. He's from the LSE. Bright guy. He's come, he's decided he's going to teach for 5, 6 years, and then he's going to go into the city and earn a whole load of money. Now, he says to me, he's absolutely adamant. If he had known that he would have to do this bureaucratic thing of of QTS and PGCE and so on, there's no way he would have come into teaching. So the fact is that he's he's one example. I've got other examples, but that's just one of people who've come into teaching, they give something, and then they go. And they don't want to have to do this this QTS business. Now, the fact is, if it's understood that it is possible for us to hire good people who then get taught how to teach on the job, as we all know happens all the time in schools, then why is it we're now being forced to get this bureaucratic stamp? Private schools forever have been allowed to employ unqualified teachers and keep them for 30 years. So why is it that school leaders in the private sector are allowed to do that, but now that freedom is going to be
But
taken away from us?
why is it a bad thing though, in terms of saying, you know, teachers should be working to, what they've said is teachers should be working towards qualified teacher status?
Because it takes up an enormous amount of bureaucratic time. I am
Okay.
very much about reducing bureaucracy for teachers. I do not want to increase it. One of the things that makes us massively successful at Michaela is that I have cut bureaucracy massively. My teachers don't spend time filling out data reports and, I mean, all the crazy stuff that happens in other schools, we don't do it. There's hardly any bureaucracy at all at Michaela. And it means that our teachers can spend their time on the stuff that really matters, planning their lessons and delivering to kids and talking to kids when they're in detention about why they were there and building relationships with the kids and doing all the stuff that teachers love. The bureaucracy that you all hate, I have kept it to an absolute minimum. This is just going to increase the amount of bureaucracy that teachers are going to have to do. And that takes them away from the classroom. And that, in my view, is completely insane. Not only is it going to make those teachers' lives worse, but it's going to prevent teachers from wanting. My teacher, my economics teacher, he would never have come into the profession at all had he known he would have to do this bureaucratic nonsense. So it's actually it's reducing the number of routes into teaching, right? There's a huge recruitment problem in teaching at the moment. We school leaders are crying out for teachers. To have one of our routes of getting teachers into the profession closed is insane. It's insane. And it's not as if we are all worried at the moment because there just isn't enough certification. Do you ever hear teachers saying, oh my goodness, the thing I'm most worried about in teaching is that we don't have enough teaching certificates. If only we had more. The problem with teaching is that we don't have enough certificates. Do you ever hear anybody saying that? No.
Yeah, but
Nobody says
they
that.
would
It's not a
argue
problem.
that's about sort of make sure they have the knowledge and skills to be the best, you know, the training, the
Yeah, and I'm telling you that that bureaucratic stamp is a load of nonsense. And find me the teacher who thinks that the problem in teaching is we don't have enough certificates. You won't find a single teacher saying that. That's completely insane.
yeah, but isn't that
Nobody
like a
thinks that.
rubber stamp of you're qualified enough, you're good enough to be a qualified teacher? Doesn't it sort of regulate it a little bit rather than, you know,
No.
like,
Look, I will find you qualified teachers who are not very good, and I will find you unqualified teachers who are
yeah.
excellent. Okay? You know this. I know this. Come on. We all know this, right? I mean, come on. We all know this. And nobody cares about that stupid certificate. As I say, there isn't a single teacher in this country, and I put money on this. There isn't a single teacher in this country who thinks that the number one problem in teaching is that we don't have enough certificates. Nobody thinks this,
But
right?
you have to have
Everybody
some
thinks,
regulation, though. I mean, there has to be, like, for example, Catherine, you as head teacher, then, are you saying that somebody, like you gave that example of that guy? So if I come up to you and I say, right, I've got a first class honours from wherever the heck, would you see that as, like, how are you judging that person then? Like, are you to employ them, if that makes sense, if they haven't been through particular things to get a qualification or a
yes,
status? Like,
I'm
how are
judging
you?
them
Is
on
it
how.
just off the interview and is it off their degree?
Yes. Look, nobody, no school leader is looking and going, how good is your certificate, teaching certificate? There isn't even, this is a pass or fail. Nobody's looking at that. And not only that, but the government says we can still employ people without a certificate. So as long as you say that that's okay, then why should I then spend their time doing bureaucracy instead of putting them in front of kids building relationships? Because that time has to come from somewhere. So either they're going to spend their time building relationships with kids, or they're going to spend it building some stupid file so that they can tick a box to get some bureaucratic certificate that nobody cares about anyway. Right?
Yasmin's called in. Yasmin, do you want to say something? Do you want to share a point?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Tom. I just had a question about QTS. So, you know, I wanted to ask, is there like possibly room for exploitation when it comes to pay if teachers don't have QTS? Because I've worked in maths where teachers, even with the same experience, are started on different pay points. And Catherine, you refer to special schools and how it will hit them. I used to be a senior leader in a PRU, and I remember that there were some teaching staff who didn't think that some of the teacher standards applied to them, even though they were teachers in the special school, because they didn't have QTS. So, for example, they didn't think that, social media regulations or the things you post about yourself online didn't apply to them. So I just wanted to ask, do you think that could possibly affect safeguarding as well?
No, what they're saying there just isn't right. I mean, you are. I mean, they're just saying that people say all sorts of things in schools. That's not true. If you're working in a school, then you're held by the same standards as anyone else. Although you make a good point about pay. Now, I have to say we don't do that at Michaela. We pay our teachers, whether they're unqualified or qualified, the same amount. But that could be something that we could change in terms of the pay, and to make sure that unqualified teachers are paid, once they've done a couple of years or whatever it is, that they're paid the same as a qualified teacher. So that is a good point, and I'd be happy with a change on the rules in terms of pay. We do pay our teachers the same, whether they're qualified or unqualified, but that's just because I think that's what's right. It is true that I wouldn't be forced to do that, and that could be changed. But to insist that everybody's spending their time on this bureaucracy, we need to be reducing the amount of bureaucracy teachers do, not increasing it. And I would say that the number one reasons why teachers leave teaching, it's because of behavior and because of workload. And the workload is the bureaucracy, right? These changes are going to increase the behavior problems and increase the bureaucracy rather than diminish. They should be reducing the bureaucracy, and they should be reducing the behavior issues. Quite the opposite.
I mean, you make some
the other
valid
thing,
points, Catherine, because I mean, there's been a lot of sort of, not complaints, but there's been a lot of people who've looked at like the ECF, the Early Careers Framework. So it's increased workload, it's increased.
it's massive. And
Yeah,
then
what people
the
have
other
to
thing
do.
is recruitment. So recruitment is a huge problem for school leaders. What is this bill doing? It's actually going to make recruitment worse. So the bill is bringing along more behavior problems. It's increasing the problem with recruitment, and it's increasing what's the other one I just said? I've got the behavior, bureaucracy, and recruitment. All of them are going to get worse with this bill. And those are the three big reasons why people leave teaching.
But can
right?
Can I be like one of your cynical detractors, Catherine, for a minute,
Yes.
and go into their voice? Why, like, for you personally in your school, or I don't know, a leader like you in a school like yours? There's not many, but they exist. So what is the particular thing there? Is there anything particular where you're going from a purely selfish point of view? Like, is there some benefit there for you, if that makes sense? Like, have you got more of those sorts of teachers who you want to?
I've got two at the moment.
Okay.
But yeah, I could have some in the future.
Yeah.
The way in which I advertise would change, So
Okay.
so yes, that one, the uniform issue, I can dodge. I can get. Well, I say dodge. I can survive with that. But I know that other schools will suffer because of that. The recruitment issue is going to affect us. There's no question that will also affect us. And the bureaucracy point, with regard to QTS, that will affect us. So,
but one of the things, and I keep coming back to this, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate, but part of this is true. Things didn't improve. You can't say that when it comes to recruitment, for example, things have been in an awful state under the last government, and even prior to that, the coalition. Like, things that have been dire for ages. So, like, these changes, as much as the arguments stand.
Tom, how old are you?
I'm 40 now, Catherine.
Right. Okay. So listen
Thanks
to me.
for reminding me of that.
Yeah. Listen to me. For those of us who are older, however bad you think, and I understand why you think things are bad, because there are various things that are bad in schools. I get it. However bad you think things have been in the last decade and a half, they were worse before, and they're going to go back to that. Okay? I'm telling you. So you need to listen to those of us who are older.
I don't know. Are you
Listen to
saying
me. Listen to all the arguments I've just made.
2010? Are you saying
Listen. Yes, but just listen to the arguments that I've just made over uniform. Listen to what I've just said about certification. Listen to what I've said about the bureaucracy, and listen to what I've said about recruitment. Okay? You know this, Tom. You know that the things that people leave teaching for is the behavior and the workload.
Yeah.
You know those are the two things that matter.
No, I think you've
right?
made some good arguments. I'm just disputing that point about you're saying pre-2010.
Yes, things were worse,
were worse.
now in some ways, okay, so they were worse up until 2020. Now things have gone crazy since then because of COVID and so on. I am telling you, you and I can come back in 5 years and speak again, Tom, and you're going to
If
be
I'm
saying
still
to
here,
me,
I
"Oh
drink
my
a lot of
goodness."
Diet Coke.
Yeah, you're going to be saying to me, "Oh my goodness, you were right, Catherine." It's just that 5 to 10 years time, you're not going to see it right away. We are going to see a slow demise when these changes take place. I've made my arguments, and then what else is there? I mean, then there's the pan that we should be in charge of our own admission numbers. But I mean, in terms of what teachers care about, we've spoken about. I think we've spoken about everything, haven't we? QTS.
I
The
think
maths
so.
and the
I don't know
rise
whether there's
thing.
anything else. They're your main
Yes.
things, aren't they?
Those are the main things. And look, it's not very many. We're looking at four things I'm talking about. I want 5 amendments from the Lords. That's all I want. And the thing is, these are they're small things. They're big things that are going to have huge impact on the schools. Now, this is something, for instance, our education secretary could be listening to the school leaders and saying, "Oh, I see. Oh, I hadn't understood about uniforms and why belonging is so important and why branded items are so important. Oh, I see. I didn't realize the certification doesn't really mean as much as I thought it meant. And actually, I don't want to make things more bureaucratic for teachers. Oh, I see. I didn't realize that Matt's ownership and that control over something and owning it and that accountability matters so much when it comes to turning around a failing school. If she were to listen to these things, she wouldn't be doing them. But she thinks she knows best because she's lived it, right?
Tony, Tony's called in, Catherine. Let's hear what Tony has to say. Go on, Tony. If Tony's there, you have to unmute yourself in the bottom left. Hello? Yes? Press unmute. No. Tony's not coming. He doesn't want to press unmute. But I think he had a point. Is he there now? Hello? Nope.
Well, look, so. Tom, I should go because I'm now realizing we've been on for 90 minutes. So
we have.
Listen, I hope I've made some of the points clearer to you. And yes, the march, please come out, everybody. 2 p.m. on 18th, Sunday, the 18th of May. It's a march for children. For all of us who think, oh my goodness, there are things that this government is not understanding when it comes to children, and we need to make some noise so that they listen to us. When any government, forget about which government it is, when a government has a massive majority, they can push through any bill they want, and they don't have to blink an eye. They are not accountable to anything. They're not accountable to us. So whatever you think, you may be a diehard Labour supporter, that's fine. But when any party has a huge majority, we have to make noise when they're doing stuff without listening to us. That's what's important here. Yeah?
Catherine, thank you ever so much, as always, for coming on. It's always interesting. It certainly gets everybody thinking, and we've had a huge number of people listening in the last 90 minutes. So thanks to everyone who has also come along. Huge thanks to our sponsor, John Catt Educational. If you're a teacher interested in your own professional development, then head over to johncattbookshop.com. Pick yourself up a John Catt book with a 20% off discount, courtesy of us at Teachers Talk Radio, TTR 2425, for 20% off any number of books on the John Catt website. This will be available as a podcast as well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow wherever you're listening to us. Get involved in the conversation following this. Tweet us, post us. We're on LinkedIn, we're on X, we're on Facebook, YouTube, everywhere you could possibly think. So definitely check it out. Catherine, thank you ever so much. Have a fantastic evening, and
Thanks, Tom.
Speak to you again soon. Really good chat.
All right, Tom. Yes, thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.